Serial killers, a topic that is widely questioned throughout the world. Most of you probably know at least one or two people who are obsessed with or amazed by serial murder. Some people wonder, are serial killers created or born? Well, that's a very difficult question. Many other people, like myself, have tried to answer it. Today, we'll give it a shot. First, let's talk about what a serial killer actually is. A serial killer is a person who commits a series of murders, often with no apparent motive and typically following a characteristic, predictable behavior pattern. Serial killers can fit into 4 categories, and sometimes an individual will fit into multiple. The first kind of killer is a power and control killer. This type of serial killer experiences complete sexual gratification from the domination and humiliation of the victim. This killer is a true sociopath and lives by his own personal set of rules and guidelines. People are pawns in their game of life. Many of the famous serial killers we have seen in history and in the media would fall under this type of serial killer. Gary Ridgway, or the Green River Killer, is a perfect example of a power and control killer. He was convicted of killing at least 49 women by strangling them. The second kind of serial killer is a visionary killer. This type of killer is compelled by voices or visions they experience and are considered psychotic. These voices and visions compel them to kill people. Herbert Mullen was a visionary killer, and he killed 13 people in the 1970s, claiming voices told him his killing stopped an earthquake that would destroy the entire state of California. The third kind of killer is a mission-oriented killer. This type of serial killer feels a need or duty to kill certain types of people or class of people, such as religious groups, political movements, or prostitutes. Joseph Paul Franklin was an American white supremacist serial killer who engaged in a murder spree spanning from the late 1970s and early 1980s. Franklin was convicted of several murders and received 6 life sentences, as well as a death sentence. The final and most common kind of serial killer is a hedonistic killer. This type of serial killer makes a strong connection between violence and sexual gratification. This type of killer can also be described as a lust or thrill killer. The killer receives pleasure from the act and has eroticized the experience. They usually take the time to torture or mutilate their victims tied up. This type of serial killer is often portrayed in fictional books and movies. Ted Bundy, or Theodore Robert Bundy, was an American serial killer and necrophile who kidnapped, raped, and murdered numerous young women and girls during the 1970s. Serial killers typically show no signs of the horrific crimes they commit and are often active and productive members of society. However, there are early signs that a person might become a killer in adulthood. The MacDonald Triad, also known as the Triad of Sociopathy or the Homicidal Triad, is a set of 3 factors that has been suggested, if all 3 or any combination of 2 are present together, to be predictive of or associated with later violent tendencies, particularly with relation to serial offenses. Animal cruelty, bedwetting, and arson are all factors of the triad. Jeffrey Dahmer, who tortured and killed 17 men, exhibited animal cruelty and arson in his own childhood. In 1963, forensic psychiatrist J.M. McDonald observed in a paper, The Threat to Kill, that these behaviors often showed up in his most aggressive and sadistic patients. Basically, if a child shows a collection of these behaviors, he may become a serial killer. Not surprisingly, most killers had very tough childhoods. As children, serial killers often suffer from emotional, physical, and sexual abuse from their parent or guardian. They also typically come from families where alcohol abuse is common, as it promotes violent and aggressive behavior. So, now that we know they share similarities in behavior, are there any genetic coding for a serial killer? With that, let's dive into the minds of these unsettling individuals. The answers to my questions are mostly open. The most likely answer, though, is that the majority of the most prolific and dangerous serial killers were genetically disposed to behave antisocially, and therefore grew up in an environment that cultivated a disregard for the lives of others. For example, many horrific serial killers have antisocial personality disorder, usually known as psychopathy or sociopathy. Individuals suffering from this exhibit a disregard for morals or feelings of other people, sadistic tendencies, a lack of fear, instability, and aggression. The heritability of psychopathy is about 38%, so some people are predisposed to becoming a psychopath. Now, keep in mind, Not every psychopath becomes a serial killer, and not every serial killer is a psychopath. Instead, there are just strong connections between the two. Alongside psychopathy, many men who become killers have significantly higher levels of testosterone in their bodies, triggering them to be more aggressive and violent in some cases. Another genetic contribution is dopamine. Dopamine is a chemical present in the nervous system that is associated with pleasure and excitement. People who have naturally low levels of dopamine typically need to seek higher levels of excitement to feel pleasure. Since many serial murderers seek the thrill of killing, this could be a genetic contribution to their tendencies. So, as far as my question goes, you can never really tell if a person will be a serial killer. The best scientists can do is predict based on childhood behaviors and some genetic differences. With that in mind, the chances of someone becoming a serial killer are very low. Even with those who have these genetic abnormalities and rough childhood experiences, most people who go through this end up as normal people with families and other relationships. Plus, serial killers only make up 0.000923% of the American population. On top of that, your chance of being a victim of one of these people is 0.00039%. So please, try not to worry about it too much. Odds are, you'll never ever have to worry about a serial killer in your lifetime.